Welcome to the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs Lounge, a weekly show from our Toronto Maple Leafs writing crew, bringing you the latest news, rumors, trades, player grades, prospects, and much more. From training camp to the playoffs, from draft day to the trade deadline, our team covers everything that happens with the blue and white. Come on in and pull up a chair. Welcome to the Maple Leafs Lounge.
Hello and welcome back to the Maple Leafs Lounge. I am your host, Peter Baracchini. It has really been a while, and again, I'm joined by my colleague and fellow Maple Leaf writer over at the Hockey Writers, Jim Parsons. Jim, as I mentioned, it's been a while since we had one of these weekly lounge episodes. Been a few weeks. How have you been? It's great to catch up with you.
I've been good, and I cover both the Oilers and the Maple Leafs. It's going a little bit better for the Oilers of late, so I'm in a little bit better mood. The Maple Leafs, not so great in terms of their standings and their last few, wins and losses and things like things are not as whatever in Leafs Nation, but it's been good. I've been busy keeping up. There's lots to talk about. So much going on with the Leafs that I've been busy. So time flies.
Yeah. Exactly. And you know what? Because there is so much to talk about, we are going to get right into that. But before we do, we at the Hockey Writers have recently expanded our offerings with a Substack dedicated to every team, as well as a general one for each day's best articles. As a Maple Leafs fan, you don't want to miss any of the great content we produce, and our Maple Leafs Substack makes that possible. Sign up to get all of THW's Maple Leafs articles delivered directly to your inbox multiple times per week. We even offer a premium subscription that gives you access to exclusive content that you can't find anywhere else, including game chats, post-game reports, specialized articles, Q&As, and more. Join now to get a discount on an annual subscription and sign up in the link, which can be found in the description below. As you mentioned off the top of the show, Jim, it's been quite hectic for the Maple Leafs. Obviously, their record in the standings hasn't been great. Their play has been inconsistent, but so has been the play of the stars in Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner. And when you look at their stats, it really isn't that great. It's been 3 assists for Marner in his last 7 and 1 goal for Auston Matthews after he had back-to-back hat tricks and including another hat trick against the Buffalo Sabres. But he's gone through stretches of, not scoring a goal. And, it's I'm not going to say it's too early to tell because we're now in the third month or heading into the third month of the NHL season. Their struggles really are a bit of a concern considering they're the top players and they need to be their top players every single night, and it's just not clicking right now.
Yeah, Auston Matthews is an interesting guy because he started the season so hot with those 2 hat tricks and then sort of fell off in terms of the goal scoring. Then he scored some more and then he fell off. He's got that, ebbs and flows, ups and downs in his game. So when you're talking about elite players in the NHL, and we can speak about anybody in the league. I mean, Leon Draisaitl, Connor McDavid both had their struggles. McDavid's got 9 points in the last 2 games, and all of a sudden he moves up like 100 spots in the standings, right? Mm-hmm. So you can turn it on and off in this league, and all of a sudden, everybody looks back at you and says, "Oh my gosh, he's so fantastic." So fair weather stuff, right? Like it doesn't take much for him to turn it back on again. He's got that skill level. The question is the consistency, right? Like, how do you get Auston Matthews and Mitch Marner to be more consistent? Because that's the big problem with this team, right? Especially come playoff time. Like, you want the regular season to be where you iron all that out so that when you hit to the playoffs and you get there, everybody's smooth sailing, everybody's clicking on all cylinders, and you don't have to worry about that drop off. They've got to figure out a way to make sure these guys don't drop off like this. And they both know that they need to be better. Marner especially has said it. He's like, I'm just not playing my best hockey right now. So he wants to kind of take it back, keep it simple, see if he can't figure it out. I have no doubt they will, but it's just it's ups and downs with these two.
Yeah, and then again, Keith even said it best, like obviously with the NHL, there's a lot more parity and there's more competition right now. Like it seems like there are teams that are like making it a tougher out than what it really should be. And you want to see that. You want to see more competition, but you got to see the star players get their opportunities and take advantage of a shift when they can. And you're just not seeing that both with Matthews and Marner at this point. And again, like you said, McDavid and Draisaitl have their struggles at the very beginning of the season. I guess basically all the Edmonton Oilers did. And now you're kind of seeing it now at the Maple Leafs, where Matthews and Marner were a bit productive, but now it's starting to tail off a bit. And you just hope that, obviously it is probably going to turn around. These are elite level players. They are, they are basically faces of the NHL at this point when you think of like names that you want to remember, and they're big time point producers. So I think right now, the struggles are evident. I think that, we're going to get into this a little bit in a few seconds or so. It would kind of be the perfect segue. But, I think maybe, you needed to see a change with the players. It seems like they got too comfortable, and maybe getting them out of that comfort zone may be a good thing for both players.
Yeah, I mean, this would be a really, really big deal if players like William Nylander weren't so hot. Tyler Bertuzzi's picked it up a little bit, and that's been a good sign for the Maple. Like, if those players are not doing what they're doing right now, this is like the sky's falling situation in Toronto, right? So you're fortunate that sometimes you have players who hit a little lull, and then the other players can kind of pick up the pace. The problem is, I don't think it's evening itself out, right? Like, Matthews and Marner are so important to the team that you can't necessarily make up the wins when those two guys aren't going. And right now, it's kind of an under 500 situation for Toronto. So they need those two to step up. It could be disastrous if the other guys weren't picking up the weight and picking up some of the slack here, but it's still not enough. They need all of these guys clicking, and those two, being at their best is important.
No, for sure. And like I mentioned previously, there was a bit of a swap at practice with the Maple Leafs, how because of those struggles that Marner is facing right now, and because how, both him and Keefe are very critical of their game at this moment. We heard Sheldon Keefe's game comments before the Pittsburgh Penguins. We heard Marner today, or earlier in the day before we recorded. Nylander gets promoted up to the top line, as a lot of people were expecting or was hoping that would happen, because Marner, you started to notice Marner's struggles for the last 2-3 weeks, even before the Sweden series. And he gets bumped down to John Tavares' line. And obviously, we know the chemistry that Marner has with everybody. He has it with Matthews, and he's shown it with Tavares. Is this a big step or something that Marner can take, where he knows he needs to simplify things, not rush any plays, and maybe John Tavares can help him out?
Yeah, I mean, John Tavares is, whether you want to call him overpaid or you want to call him on the back end of his career, whatever you want to say about John Tavares, he's still a very good hockey player, and he's played with a lot of different people, and he's played in a lot of different situations, and he's aware of what his role on the team is. He's not necessarily the elite level guy, and he's going to be like a point per game person that sort of flies under the radar for most time. So you can put him with a guy like Marner and expect that there's going to be some sort of result there, right? So I have no doubt that, switching things up, and sometimes that's all it takes, right? Is just kind of giving somebody a different look, changing it up just a little bit, see if you can't get the people motivated, find some chemistry, see if that works. I have no doubt that these two will be able to do that. It's just whether or not this is the best fit for him long term, and whether you want to keep these two on the same line, or you find it better that you have different combinations. But short term, it's like, I don't know what the best, get a new coach, right? You get that little boost. Put a new line mate on your line, you get a little boost, right? Like, that's kind of what could happen here. So it could be good. I think it could be. I mean, Tavares is a heck of a hockey player.
Yeah, I think we're not going to mention coaching changes, because there have been quite a few, and obviously you're familiar with the whole Jay Woodcroft thing. But
no, I was using that more as like a metaphor, or an analogy, right? It's not really something I think they're talking about doing in Toronto, but
for sure,
it's just one of those things where when you make a change for the sake of change, sometimes it works.
No, absolutely. It was just kind of fitting how that happened. But as you mentioned, Tavares is not going to be or he could still probably hover around a point per game, but not go as high as maybe the 1.1, 1.2 that you would get with Matthews or Marner. But, the chemistry from Matthews and Marner, Tavares and Marner has always been there, going back to 21-22. That's like over 800 minutes, 167 or over 800 minutes played at 5-on-5. Marner and Tavares have a pretty decent stat line in terms of their production, especially when you're looking at their underlying numbers. 56.76 goals for percentage, 56% high danger goals for percentage, 53% scoring chances for. So they do have the chemistry. And I think now, because Marner, he tends to slow the game down a little bit. And when he does, that's when he's on his game, where he's able to change the speed of the game. And if he's able to spot Tavares in front of the net where he's always posted up, I think that could benefit both players. I mean, we see how well Bertuzzi, Tavares, and Nylander were playing. Obviously, Nylander has a little bit more pep in his step. He likes to be, full guns a-blazing, going in on the attack. Marner likes to take a patient approach. So hopefully that kind of plays in. And if Marner's able to, still pick up that pace of play a little bit more and be creative, using his edge work to his advantage and getting to the open spots, drawing players in, that's going to work wonders for both Bertuzzi and even Tavares at that point. So really interesting to see how it's going to play out. The numbers show that it is successful. Is it going to be for a short-term thing, or if Nylander still plays well and Auston Matthews wing, what's going to happen there? I think that even if you balance it out, no matter what, it's going to work out for both players.
Yeah, I don't see the offense being a huge thing. I think, it's important, obviously, but they're so skilled and they're so good that that whatever's going on right now won't last. Mm-hmm. I think the bigger issue, and we're going to talk about this, is just the goals allowed, the goals against, and how that has hurt this Maple Leafs team so much more than, spurts and ups and downs in the offense, right? So I figure they'll figure it out. They'll find a way to make it work, but there's other problems in Leafs Nation that they're probably looking to address right now.
Exactly. And as we talked about other problems to address, before that practice, or after the practice, actually, it was kind of a shock to see Brad Treliving talk, but, we are getting to the quarter way point of the season. And obviously we talk about the inconsistencies, both in goal, both on the fence, and Treliving had a really great comment in terms of the assessment. And he says, basically, we've been hit and miss. And that has been true. The high points, the low points. He says that it is a little concerning. So he isn't sugarcoating it. He is telling it like it is. And obviously it starts with him, where he's got to make the deals. How did you make, or what did you take away from his, not necessarily surprise presser, but his talk to the media and the comments made?
Well, he was pretty revealing, for the level that Treliving typically gives you, right? It's not like he's shying away or avoiding questions, but he doesn't often give you a whole lot. Like, he doesn't say, hey, I'm looking for this, or this is where I'm at with the Nylander stuff. In fact, he said previously on Nylander that he wasn't going to talk about it anymore, but he did today. So he talked about it a little bit more. As far as the defense goes and the blue line, everybody's been aware that I think going into the season, he knew he wasn't done, and that his job as the GM trying to find the right mix of players, he hadn't finished whatever it was he had set out to do. Now, we don't know what that means necessarily, if there was some sort of plan to move somebody, or he was counting on an LTR situation, or I don't know what exactly he was thinking, but he did want to improve the defense by adding somebody who was bigger, more physical, who could play a little more stay-at-home style, because they added a lot of offensive pieces, but they didn't really address that. So to have him say that today was not a huge shocker, because I think going into the season, everybody knew that's what he wanted anyway. The difference now is, okay, what happens with Klingberg, right? And so when he's talking about, the LTIR situation, and knowing at the end of next week or this week, if he's lucky, where Klingberg is at and what's going to happen there, then okay, what can we do? What can Treliving do? So he gave a lot of information. He sort of kind of laid out what he's thinking, what his plan for this week, maybe next week will be. He didn't shy away from the fact that he's looking at the market. He's trying to make a trade. Not a huge shocker, but he came out and said it. So that is helpful for fans who want to know exactly what they're trying to do and what they're thinking about doing and where Klingberg is at, because, it's been somewhat of a mystery this season.
Yeah, and obviously with Treliving saying the comments that he did, obviously you want to see that clarity. You want to see that, not necessarily consistency in the words, but, to give the reassurance that, he is telling it like it is. And that's what you want to see from the GM. It's obviously, you don't want to be in this position, and the Maple Leafs are still in the playoffs, but, there could be a little bit more of improvement. And they've had injuries from the start too, whether it be Klingberg's injury, which we will talk about as well. Connor Timmins going down, Jake McCabe as well, Timothy Liljegren. They are pretty banged up on the blue line. So this is actually kind of the perfect timing with Klingberg on LTIR right now. There's also news that, they're going to get more clarity on Klingberg at the moment. By the end of the week, he is dealing with a hip issue. It was confirmed that it was probably in that week against Florida where things started to go a little bit downwards in terms of that, and you start to see his movements be a little bit slower than expected. So how does this Klingberg news, depending on the severity of it, change his approach in terms of adding to the defense?
Well, he's got a lot less scrambling and maneuvering, and there's a lot of fewer Tetris pieces to move around to make this work, right? Like if Klingberg is put on LTIR and it is found out that he needs surgery, at the very least, he's probably done for the season, right? Now, is there a chance that maybe he comes back to the playoffs? Who knows? That's a long time away, and we'll see what happens there. But if he's out for the year, that's basically $4 million that the Maple Leafs can now play with to add another defenseman. And that gives you enough to work a trade with Calgary for whether it's Zadorov or Tanev. Look at another player from somewhere else, whether that's a dumb out of Arizona. I mean, who knows what you're looking at? If you're Brad Treliving, right, you're probably checking out all sorts of options. And as the weeks go by here, I think more options will probably open themselves up. But he's now got the money to go ahead and do that if it is deemed that Klingberg needs surgery and he's going to be out forever. So that makes his job a whole lot easier. It's just about finding the right trade partner and what are you giving back, and what assets are you giving up? Because finding the space on the salary cap is not going to be a problem now.
Absolutely. And we will get back to that talk. But first, another quick word from the hockey writers. We once again have expanded our offerings with a weekly Substack dedicated to every single team, including the Toronto Maple Leafs. So be sure to sign up in the link in the description below. Put your email to get all the great content from our Maple Leafs team, from Jim, myself, and everybody else for all your news and everything about the Maple Leafs. So as we get into the second part of our show, obviously we were talking about the defense a little bit before our trades, Klingberg on LTIR, but some breaking news right now from Chris Johnson regarding the NHL All-Star Game. The NHL is bringing back the draft for Toronto. 4 captains will choose their teams with the help of celebrity co-captains. Obviously not necessarily directly involved with the Maple Leafs, but because the All-Star Game is in Toronto, Jim, what are your thoughts about bringing something that many fans are hoping would come back?
I think the more fun you can add to the All-Star weekend, the more people are going to tune into it, right? Like,
yeah,
fans have sort of looked at the All-Star Game for the NHL and said, this is probably the worst of all the 4 sports that do it. And you need activities and things like that to get people kind of actively interested in it. And as much as it sucks for the last 2 people who are drafted on both of those teams, because it does, they'll never say it and they joke around, and whether there's a car given away or whatever the case is, like, it sucks when you're sitting there. It's like when you're in elementary or junior high school and you're the last one picked for the baseball team. Like, it's just a crappy feeling, right? So they have a little fun with it. You watch to see who goes first, you watch to see who goes last, and how everybody reacts to it. So it's an element to the game that you can sort of make interesting. There's always going to be what they really need to do is these captains need to get together and really have some sort of like conspiracy way of picking these teams and really shake it up, because that would be something else, right? Like to go through and instead of just going on best player available on both situations, just have a plan, like it's a very obvious one and something that is so like, what are they doing? Make the game completely interesting, because the players, they don't really care about it anyway, right? They're just there to hang out and have a good time with each other, enjoy the weekend. And that's why they always talk about these All-Star games going to nice destinations, because the players don't want to go to the other ones, right? So the more you can make this fun and the more you can add activities to it, the more fans are probably going to get a little interested in it.
Absolutely. And you know what? I go back to that Phil Kessel draft where he was the last one taken and everyone's laughing, but you know what? He got the car out of it all. And you know what? You want some entertainment value. You want to have some fun with it. And I think that's the main thing that's been lacking. Like, they try to put on events or put on skill sets or skill challenges that just really hasn't quite worked out. And hopefully this kind of changes with everything going on right now. But yeah, a big step forward for the All-Star Game, because that was one thing I always loved, was the draft. And hopefully we get to see that, not just for this year, but also in previous years. So,
it's a simple thing. It doesn't require anything, right? It's
exactly.
It's not one of those things where you have to make this whole new challenge and it's probably going to go wrong because it's the first time you're doing it and the targets don't fall over, or whatever the case is that they had happen this year, where everything was new stuff was tried and it just looked kind of cheesy and didn't really pan out. This is easy. Just sit a bunch of people in a room, let them make their picks, have some fun with it, joke with each other. You can see the personalities of the players as you go through it. it's simple. Like it's a no-brainer, really.
Mm-hmm. No, absolutely. And as much as we want to talk about the All-Star game in Toronto, let's get back into the Maple Leaf talk. Obviously, the rumors surrounding the Maple Leafs in connection to Nikita Zadorov and Chris Tanev from the Calgary Flames are starting to get a little bit more interesting right now. And, this is from an article on our website by the old prof. Basically, with Joshua Cloak of The Athletic spoke on Kipper and Bourne, basically saying that, the Maple Leafs might make a move sooner rather than later. And obviously that was the main talking point when we were talking about the injuries and everything like that, where you got to address it soon. And obviously Zadorov and Tanev would be key fixtures in a deal if that is the case. Again, does it seem like more or likely that Toronto's going to get both players, one player? What do you make of that situation, or who would be the best fit right now?
That's a good question. I'm thinking that Treliving probably likes the idea of Zadorov more, just because he's bigger and physical, and he's got energy about him. Tanev is a solid player who is going to add a lot in the leadership role and minutes played and things like that. But I don't know how you do both of them, especially at the same time. Like, it's certainly possible, but if I'm Calgary, I'm probably moving these players in separate deals. Right. Like, in fact, I'm going to move every single one of my pending UFAs in separate deals because I think you get a greater return if you sell them separately. Now, if Toronto comes up and says, hey, we'll give you this, and this for those two players, I mean, you have to look at it and consider it if you're Craig Conrad at the Flames organization. But usually, if you add up the sum of all the parts in separate deals, you're going to get a better return. Right. So if you move Tanev in I just don't know what the return's going to be. Like, how many teams are interested in a player like Zadorov? I've heard a second round pick. I've heard maybe more. I don't know. It just depends on the supply and the demand for the player, right? If there's like 6 or 7 teams that want this guy, the price is going to go up. If there is only a handful of teams and nobody can afford to do it, and Flames aren't going to retain salary or whatever the situation is, then you're sort of limited. And Toronto's one of those teams that now, if Klingberg goes on LTR, has a little bit of cap room. So I don't know exactly if it's easier to move both players. I don't know if I'm Calgary, if I'm moving them both in the same deal or not, but it's certainly something that Treliving is probably looking at. We've heard from way back that he likes them both. Yeah. So, and he's got, a history with both of them.
Exactly. The history is huge, considering that he signed Tanev, brought him in, traded for Zadorov, and they were key fixtures before things started to go south with the Flames. But yeah, I agree in the sense that it is difficult to bring in one or even both of them in one deal. If they do, obviously, I think Zadorov mainly is the main priority or main target at this point, because he is the one that basically the only one out of all the UFAs that requested that trade out. We saw after that Calgary game with the Leafs where Dan Milstein was, kind of teasing about that with Maple Leafs fans. And then it was like 10 minutes later, it was actually confirmed that he wanted to trade out. So I think if the Maple Leafs were to get one of them, it definitely was going to be Zadorov, because it's already known that he wants out of there. Tanev, I do think, is a different situation. And if they do want to make a full package deal, you are looking at, maybe that second round pick gets bumped up to a first. You are looking at maybe prospects like Nick Abruzzese, Pontus Holmberg, possibly going the other way. To give them more assets as a result of that massive deal. So again, it's interesting to see how this is going to unfold, because they are both players that the Maple Leafs could thrive on. Both, as you mentioned, Zadorov is a little bit more physical, but Tanev kind of has that TJ Brody side where, he does defend well against the rush. He does break up plays. And I think that's going to be something where if you want to address a defense and you want to have a steady defense wins championship kind of mentality, those are the type of players that will win you championships. We saw what happened with the Vegas Golden Knights and how their defense, not great offensively, but they were smart and breaking out of their zone very effectively. So if they are going to be those two players, and there is going to be a massive deal, you got to pay the price right away.
My guess is they get both players would be that these would be two separate transactions, right? Like you talked about the idea that Toronto wants to do a move sooner than later. If they're looking at doing something right away within the next 2 or 3 weeks, then you add one of them, you see how it goes, see what kind of difference it makes. If Toronto's still struggling and for whatever reason the playoffs look like it may be a maybe, then why would you add the second guy unless you believe that second guy can absolutely put you over the top? Whereas if you add the first guy and all of a sudden you go on a bit of a run and you're in the playoff picture and things happen with your roster, knock on wood, nobody else goes on LTIR or something like that, or the market for a Tanev isn't as big as you thought it would be, and then you can come back to the deadline and look at it again, then maybe you add Tanev at that time, right? So for me, if I'm Toronto, I'm probably looking at both players, but in separate deals. Get the one that you think might help you right now, then maybe look at this closer to the deadline for the other one, see where Calgary's at with their season, what they're looking to get in return, what the market looks like, and then maybe you make that second move. But I could see them doing both. It's just I don't see it at the same time. I think it's one now and then one later.
No, fully agree. And two kind of like final quick points before we end off the show. Obviously, we talked about how they needed more consistency from their bottom six in terms of scoring. The new formed line of Max Domi, Nick Robertson, and Calle Jarnkrok seems to be very effective and, a little bit more energetic since they formed about 2 weeks ago. What are your takeaways from that line? And is this one that the Maple Leafs can run with, or maybe still find something to improve on with them?
Well, first thing I'll do is I'll say that I've been wrong about Nick Robertson. If you remember back on some of the other shows that we did, I had said I didn't see him having a big role in the team this season. I just didn't think that he was going to be healthy enough to stay in the lineup, that maybe the Maple Leafs should look at moving him. He's proven it wrong. So I'm going to eat that one because I think Nick Robertson has had a decent season, and he's, knock on wood again, that he stays healthy, because the fact that he is healthy has helped a lot. So kudos to him for playing well this season. Jarnkrok is that, Swiss Army knife of a player, right? He's going to do well in whatever role. And then Max Domi, to his credit, has picked it up after a really slow start. So I don't know if this line is a long-term fit or a long-term thing. We'll see. But, you take what you can get, right? When we talked about Matthews and Marner struggling and you need other people to pick up the slack a little bit, these three have done their part, right? So it's good to see that there's some other guys, picking up the slack here. But yeah, kudos to Nick Robertson, because I'm glad he's healthy. I'm glad he's contributing. I'm glad he's staying in the lineup. And I did not think that was going to happen this season.
Yeah, because there were already talks about, him possibly being dealt, or, him getting sent back down, give him a fresh start and opportunity. But luckily one opened up and he is thriving. And I think this line is just a perfect blend of speed, energy, and getting that offensive zone time. I know they've been really effective in doing that as of late. So again, good on them for finding a line that, they, at that moment, the top six was firing on all cylinders, but they needed help. And now they're getting help from that third line, which is very important. And the second point is, obviously, we know that Joseph Woll is aiming to become the starter of this team. It's looking like that a little bit with the homestand coming up. Obviously, Ilya Samsonov still having his struggles from time to time. Should the Maple Leafs go out and get a goaltender, or are they willing to just ride it out with both of these goalies?
I suppose it depends on who's available. Like what is your cap situation? I think the bigger priority is getting that defenseman that you're really looking for and seeing if that person's out there first. And then if your goaltending continues to struggle, if Samsonov, he's been so hit and miss this season. If he continues to have that problem, I don't know that you can feel comfortable with your duo going into the playoffs. So you should probably look at what's out there and what's available. And from experience, because I cover the Oilers and I know that they're looking for a goaltender, from what we understand, the market is extremely high. Like, if you want to go out and get a goaltender right now, you are going to pay a major price. Now, some of that, the Oilers don't have the leverage, which is probably why the prices are so high. But I would assume that any team looking for a goaltender right now is going to have to pay out the nose for it. So if you're a Toronto, you're probably not doing that right now, while your two goaltenders can do whatever they're capable of doing. But I think if it continues and you're in the playoffs and you're thinking, man, oh man, this might not be the most comfortable, then you look at your options. But get the defenseman first, and then see what you can do. It's unfortunate that Samsonov hasn't played terribly well, and Woll just doesn't have a bunch of experience, relatively speaking. But I don't know that you address it right now. I think you wait and see, and where does it go from here?
Yeah, I agree. Wait until you get those defenders that can alleviate some of that pressure off, because we have seen Woll have better puck location, seeing the puck very well, better lateral movements, isn't over aggressive, and the flexibility is just, out of this world from what we've seen with him making highlight reel saves. doing the splits from time to time. But I do think that if you put like a better blue line in front of him, I think you're going to see better results because he is looking like to be the starter of the future. Samsonov, again, different story. It seems like he's on it one game, but off the next. But then when he's on that one game, he lets in a soft goal and still some shaky moments. So you really don't know what to expect. I think the market is very, very limited to what the Maple Leafs can do in terms of adding another name. I mean, you could add or bring up Martin Jones. I don't think he's going to be an answer because he's now basically the third string goalie in the American Hockey League with Dennis Hildeby taking over. As much as I like Hildeby, you're not going to give him that opportunity just yet. Probably next season. Who knows? Maybe it could be a Joseph Woll, Dennis Hildeby tandem if he continues to play lights out in the AHL for the Marlies. But we'll see. Right now, I think you're just going with those two goaltenders and hoping that Woll can be the guy in the playoffs to shut everything down.
Yeah, and whoever you're looking at adding has to be better than what you have, right?
Yeah.
Like, there's just no point in going out and giving up a bunch of assets for somebody who might be the same or worse than what you already have on your roster. So you need to identify that goaltender that is a major upgrade for you, and that's when you make the deal and not any other time.
Absolutely. And that is all the time that we have for this episode of the Maple Leafs Lounge. Once again, thank you for tuning in. Be sure to sign up for the Maple Leaf Substack with all the latest info, articles, and live updates, game chats, post-game reports, you name it. We will have it all from our fantastic team over at the Maple Leafs or at the Hockey Writers Maple Leafs team from Jim and myself as well as everybody else. The link is in the description below. Sign up right now, and you can also get a discount on an annual subscription. Once again, that is it for this episode. For Jim Parsons, I'm Peter Baracchini, and we will see you next time on the Maple Leafs Lounge.